Today I wanted to talk about cross-cultural relationships, marriages, because a lot of our Muslim communities tend to be fearful maybe of their children marrying outside of their own communities, or transcending the boundaries of what they're comfortable with as their own culture. And there might be fears of racism or facing stigma because of these presumptions or stereotypes that they have. And what I want to focus on today, because I think we share this experience, we're both married to individuals who are not part of our same culture, but still part of the Middle Eastern Arab countries. And oftentimes the assumption is we're a monolithic group, which is not the case. There are still differences, and even dialects in terms of accents, even though it's Arabic, can be drastically different. So I want to touch base upon that and really have a conversation with you about what your experience is, since it's quite unique. It's a long distance relationship at the moment. So just touching upon that and just talking about some of that, bringing that to light, and educating people on marriage can work. It doesn't have to be someone from your own ethnic background, from your own culture, for it to work, and for your children to be treated right. And
I love what you said about this fear of a lot of communities, and I think it's apparent in Arab communities especially as well. Well, I guess because I'm from it, so I see it a lot. But yeah, there's definitely a fear, and sometimes it's from a good place, but a lot of the time it's a lot of ignorance and a lot of stereotypes, like you said. But the world is changing, and it's changing really, really fast. And we've seen just in the past few years that almost everyone I know is not with someone from their own culture. Or it's the cross-cultural part is definitely growing.
What's your experience with cross-cultural relationship?
A bit about me is I'm ethnically Iraqi. I was born in Kuwait, and I moved here when I was 1 to Canada. So I'm pretty much born and raised in Canada. And my husband is half Lebanese, half Iranian. And he lives in Lebanon currently. So that's a bit about us. But I guess what makes ours a bit maybe easier is that we're both very westernized. We've both lived in the West. He's lived in the West as well, and so that's made it very easy in terms of communication and culture. We have a lot of similarities, but even then, of course, you're gonna have differences. And my experience has been, I think it's been pretty positive. Of course, we're together, but I've definitely noticed differences that I never thought about. Cross-cultural differences, but I think it's things that you don't really think about because it's not stuff you hear. The main stuff that you hear is these big differences. The language, for example. In my case, it's very small things, small differences in culture that we have that I never thought about.
When it comes to Muslim relationships, and our religion does not distinguish between someone who has an ethnic or cultural background. But as people, unfortunately, we do. I've heard it from so many different communities, where one of the criteria people are looking for, someone who shares my same ethnic background or same cultural background. Part of it might be for ease, perhaps, so they don't have to learn about a different culture. They don't have to adapt to a different culture. Some of it might be fear or even simply ignorance. And some people think their culture is more elite than others. And that's really unfortunate. How was that conversation with your parents? How did they perceive it?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's really important to talk about. And this whole elitism that you were talking about, it's definitely prevalent in, I think, majority of cultures have it. Everyone thinks they're better than everyone else. But for my parents and my family, I think the cultural differences aren't that big. And to them, they weren't an issue. I think that the bigger issue was, him being overseas. That to them was a bigger concern than where he's ethnically from. But I know for a lot of families, the ethnic part is a make or break, unfortunately. And I think it's changing though. I think with time, with more people marrying outside of their culture, it's becoming more normalized, and it's becoming more prevalent. Like, so many people that we know are in cross-cultural relationships.
One of the reasons they might not marry within their own culture is, well, I can't find a suitable spouse from within my own culture.
Yeah.
Some might resort to marrying outside of their own culture here in the West or wherever they are, but some people end up marrying someone from overseas.
Yeah.
And one of the fears we hear, and it's this sense of like wanting to protect their children, whether it's a male or female,
Yeah.
are they using me just to get here?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That is probably one of every
Yeah.
single person I've met
Every
who's brought
parent's
some.
fear.
Every parent's fear is for their child to get hurt.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it comes down to. How do you work with that mentality, and how do you assure your parents that this is a real relationship, this person is not trying to just come here just to gain citizenship eventually?
Yeah. No, it's tough. And I think the fear comes from, like, it comes from somewhere. I mean, there's a lot of people that actually do that, you know, and it's so unfortunate. It's so sad. But, you know, a lot of people do use people to get wherever here, you know, to whichever country that will grant them citizenship that they want. But so I think our parents, you know, seeing those things, even us seeing those stories, it's just the number one fear. So long distance is definitely hard, because you really have to take your time to get to know someone and make sure that they're in it for the right intentions. And I think it comes with time and communication and building trust. And it's tough. I don't know how much I can speak on that, because my family, you know, knew my husband before we talked. So it wasn't like he was just a stranger from across the ocean. I don't know. I don't know if things would be the same way as they were if that was the case, if they were completely a stranger, they didn't know their family, they didn't know anything about them. So yeah, that's tough. I don't know how you can get to know someone from complete scratch online. That's something I'm scared of. So, yeah.
But that's something I've heard, and it's just one of those things that came to mind. Having lived in Lebanon for a period of time, and you actually got the opportunity to be exposed to that, at least that side of his culture, and his family and the people in general. What are some of the challenges that you faced?
I think it was mostly being in Lebanon and experiencing Lebanon, and you know, in my head I was like, oh, we're all Arab and we all speak Arabic. It's, you know, there's not going to be that big of a difference. But like, no, it's very different. I mean, living there as an Iraqi, and you know, my accent is very different than the Lebanese accent. So, you know, going out, everyone knows as soon as I open my mouth that I'm not Lebanese. Alhamdulillah, like, I didn't really experience any racism. Like, when I was there, like, people were so kind. And, you know, when they asked me, like, oh, where are you from? Like, are you Iraqi? They usually knew I was Iraqi. So it was really nice. They were really kind. I didn't have any problems. But it was just that communication that I thought was going to come so easily. It didn't, because I had to start learning a lot of the Lebanese words, because they wouldn't understand what I'm trying to say. You know, if I'm asking, like, how much is this? They don't understand what I'm saying. So yeah, I had to really adapt to, like, you know, using some Lebanese wording here and there. And his family, they understand everything. Like, they understand me perfectly. So it wasn't a challenge with that. Being Iraqi in Lebanon, like, making friends was pretty hard, because I just didn't understand the social cues, I guess, of the Lebanese people. Like, you know, Iraqi people, I guess because I've lived with them my whole life, I really understand how to, you know, talk and what to say, what are funny jokes, what do they consider funny, how do they treat you. Like, it's just very different than how the Lebanese work and how they're social. So, you know, going into it, I was like, what is going on? Like, why are people like they won't talk to me? For example, I have to really put in effort. So it was a bit of a struggle for sure, but yeah, again, like, alhamdulillah, I had that experience and nothing bad came out of it. It was just a lot of learning that I got out of it, which was really nice.
From my experience with a cross-cultural relationship, one of the main common ground we had is we both had grown up in a Western country. Here, my parents raised me on that culture, but the Western culture plays a huge role, whatever that means. We're not going to get into the details of the Western culture, but just the way of life, the way of thinking, social life, whatever it may be. And a lot of times, to me, at least in my experience, that played a bigger role, and that was more important for me than meeting someone who was ethnically from the same country or from the same origins. But once we got together, you start noticing some cultural differences. But there's also challenges. But there can be a lot of benefits. And what are some of the benefits that you saw from being exposed to a different culture?
Yeah, oh, for sure. There's so many. One of the nice things about marrying someone from a different culture is that you start to relate to all these cultures. So now I feel like I have this sub community, like this sub Lebanese community and this sub Iranian community that are kind of have become my communities too, you know? So you kind of adopt the people from that country almost, and you know, people start to look at you like, oh, your husband is Lebanese, so you know about Lebanon, you know, or like your husband's Iranian, so you're kind of Iranian, like even though I'm not, but you know, because my husband is, it really gives me access to these communities in a way that I would have never had before, which is really it's such a big perk, and that would go for any community that you marry into. So yeah, that's definitely a really big perk. I've gained so many friendships and so many you know, almost family from these communities, and I would have never had them because I would have never had the same access to them as I do after marriage. So that's a big perk that I had. And yeah, I think like little things of like, oh, that's really neat, you know, like you said, like you do that in your culture, like that's really cool, like why don't we always do that? Like let's do that. And now I have all these cultures to choose, you know, really neat things that I really like, and I can now adopt them into my own culture. So you almost become this hybrid. And of course, saying that will also come with challenges because people like boxes and people like labels, and when you become too hybridy, you start to relate almost less to each thing. So, you know, me as an Iraqi Canadian, I'm a hybrid, and it makes it very hard for me to relate to a lot of Canadian values, and it also makes it hard for me to relate to a lot of Iraqi values. And then you add your husband in the mix, which is now, okay, so now I kind of relate to Iraqi, Iranian, Lebanese, Canadian. It becomes kind of this chaotic mess, but it's nice. But people don't like that. A lot of people don't, they'll get confused by that, or they won't, you know, you're not really any of those things because now you're too much of everything else. You're too little of one thing. So yeah, I think we've all felt that, just being, you know, our own ethnicities living in Canada. We've already felt that, almost this attachment from each culture. But because of that, we have this new culture that we all feel very strongly connected to, and we can relate only, I feel, really strongly to other people that also have that same diaspora. So yeah, I think, yeah, it comes with perks, but at the same time, it comes with challenges. Like, you know, I always say, like, our kids are going to be confused. Like, what are they? You know, if someone asks them, where are you from? What are they supposed to say? They have, like, 4 things to choose from. So I think, you know, maybe by the time, you know, our kids grow up, that's going to be so normal that, you know, there's not going to be a kid anymore maybe that's going to say, I'm only from this one country. We're seeing it less and less. So yeah, I think there's a lot of perks. You gain access to communities, you gain new cultural things and ways of doing things that you never did before. And you gain knowledge. You start to know so much more about people from that country. You know, I relate to people in Lebanon and Iran a lot differently now than I did before I was married, because now I really know the things that they're going through because my husband goes through them. So yeah, those are kind of the perks, and they're almost like it's a double-edged sword. You know, with each perk you're gonna have maybe a challenge or someone seeing it differently. But yeah, I think when you go into it looking for positives, that's what you're gonna get out of it. And I think when you get married to someone in another culture, another perk is, like I said, you gain knowledge, you gain access, you're on the in now. So a lot of stereotypes or a lot of, you know, just ignorance that you had, kind of, you know, you start to understand more, and you start to, like, they start to go away, I mean, and things that I was like, oh yeah, our culture is better because we do it this way. No, it's not that it's better, it's just different. People just have different ways of doing things, and each one is good in its own way. Each one serves its purpose in its own way, and it's just different people doing life differently.
Yeah.
And a lot of stigmas and judgments and stereotypes that maybe I had in the back of my head, they're not there anymore. So being this weird hybrid is so important, because our lack of one strong identity has brought us closer to so many people. And there's no more racism if people just got to know each other and started to see each other as human beings and love each other. So yeah, I think a lot of misjudgments definitely go away and have gone away for me after marriage. So yeah,
Since in our situation, I'm a Lebanese married to an Iraqi.
yeah.
You're an Iraqi, essentially married to a Lebanese. We'll go with that.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're like skipping over. We're skipping over the other half, but since they're in Lebanon and we're more exposed to that culture.
Yeah.
I have noticed. I know we talked about this.
Yeah.
Some differences. It's little differences, but when you encounter it, you're like, oh, that's how you do it.
That's how you do it.
That's how you do it.
Okay, I'm gonna roll with this.
What do we do when it comes to greetings?
Greetings.
Do you want to share your experience?
Okay. Greetings. Okay, so in my culture as an Iraqi, when you go into a room filled with women, usually you're gonna go up to each woman and say salam and do the kiss, and you do that for everyone. And sometimes it's too much, but you never go into a room without saying salam to each person individually. So then when I was in Lebanon, one time we had like a gathering, and I went into the room and everyone just looking at me, and I was like, oh, what do I do? He just said, what do you do? And nobody stood up. So I was like, okay. So then I just said salam, and then I just found a spot and sat down. And I remember being like, that is the weirdest thing. What was that? What just happened? Why did no one say salam to me? How rude. What is going on? And then it just, with every gathering I went to, I realized that's normal. And I kind of got used to it, because I was like, oh, salam. And then I'd sit down. And then coming back here, I'm like, oh no, go back to each person. But yeah, that was really funny, because I didn't, it's not something you even think about unless you are put in that situation. So
now I go around and say salam.
Now I just go.
No, actually, now we switched.
We switched.
We switched.
Now we know. We read our crowd, but yeah, it's so weird. The first time something that you really don't even think about, greeting people. I thought everyone greeted people how I greeted people. I'm sure for you too. Yeah. But yeah, it's so funny when you're put in the situation.
And they probably thought I was rude, standoffish.
And they probably thought it was so weird for standing there for
waiting
5 extra seconds, holding out my hand.
It's little things like that. How about when it comes to social gatherings?
Okay. No, I didn't even know that was a thing until I was in Lebanon, because sometimes we'd have people over, and then by the time I went to go put on my scarf and get changed, I'd come back and they're gone. What is going on? How did they leave so fast? And they just come, they have their coffee, drink it, and then they're out. They're gone. They don't stay for more than an hour. If they do, it's wow, they're here for a long time. Why are they still here? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, you start getting used to that. And so before, I'd be like, oh, someone's coming over. I'm going to cancel all my plans for the next 5 hours. And then I realized it's very in and out. It's it's very nice, because you can have so many different people at your house that same day, and they're never there at the same time. They just come in and out, in and out. But yeah, that was so weird to me at the beginning too. I was like, why are they here for such a short amount of time? In my culture, it's literally a full day occasion. If my mom says we have guests, and halas, I'm at home till 1 a.m. serving guests. So yeah, that was really funny. I like that one.
that one. And for that one, I would like a middle ground between the two.
Yeah.
The one thing we also discussed is when it comes to when you invite people over. In Lebanese culture, unless I specify I'm having you over for dinner, I'm having you over for tea and dessert. I'm not having you over for a full meal.
Yeah.
in Iraqi culture, I have learned, and I just, like, when people started inviting us over, once I got married, inviting us over as a couple, I would show up. They have a full spread. They have them, and I would be so confused. So that was the thing. And then it's funny because once we had to start inviting people over, I didn't catch on. I didn't catch on. So once we started, like, you know, once we wanted to start having people over, my husband was like, okay, so what are we doing? Like, takeout? Are we cooking?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, when you, like, Iraqi culture, when you have people over, you make them a meal. I was like, Lebanese culture, we just do tea and dessert.
Yeah, tea and dessert.
I'd prefer.
So what do you do now?
It depends. Honestly, how it is now, like, if you had me over for a meal, I'll have you over for a meal, but then after that, I'd be like, coming over, I'd be like, just tea.
Yeah, you'll tell them.
Just so they know.
Just so they know, yeah. I already ate.
I already ate. And also, like, just, like, every time I want to visit a friend, you're going to have a full meal.
Yeah,
you're never going to have me over. I never want to come over because I'm going to think it's going to be a whole ordeal for you.
And I'm never going to invite you because I don't want to make dinner. Barely make dinner for myself. No, that's so true, though. When I was in Lebanon, same thing. If anyone came over, it was just freshly squeezed orange juice or some freshly squeezed situation, and that's it. And it was mostly coffee, like coffee, black coffee, like, you know, homemade black coffee, and then that's it. They'd come, drink the coffee. It was like, once the coffee's done, their stay is also done. Once the juice is done, their stay is done. It kind of goes hand in hand. But yeah, it's dinners and stuff aren't a really, it's not like a necessity for inviting people over, which I was like, oh wow, like, it's kind of nice.
I like that because it takes away the pressure of having to, like, especially when I like to have people over, I want to sit, I want to talk, I want to catch up. So a lot of times, like, I might prepare desserts, I might buy desserts, I'll have it there.
Yeah.
But I don't want that pressure of,
I can't invite someone unless
I'm making a meal. And even now, like, with a lot of our girlfriends and friends, I've been very vocal about it. Even when I go to them, I'm coming over for tea.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's nice.
And because I want to see you, I want to talk. I don't want you to get up and down just making sure, like, you're being a good hostess.
So
just
true.
sit down. I just want to catch up. When it comes to that, obviously there's some occasions where you want to have people over.
Yeah, you want to make food. Of course.
Even with our friends, and gladly we're all the same. Like, it's not like someone is, you know.
No,
anytime we do something, we all make, like, if you're making a meal, I'm making dessert. It's like we're coming together as friends. We're coming together, and I think that, you know, today when we're talking about these things, it's not just cross-cultural. It's also Western versus Middle Eastern. There's so many things that are part of the conversation.
There's so many things.
And what I love is we can pick and choose. We just have to be open-minded and just know if you don't like something, you don't have to do it. And just be receptive and understanding that I may do something this way, you do something a different way. And if you're in a relationship where you're facing a situation and it's very different, reach a compromise together. Or one time, well, if we're with people from your own cultural background, I'll accommodate your needs. Yeah. And it just, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to touch on is, what advice do you have to parents or to individuals who right now are struggling because their parents are not receptive and open to them being in a cross-cultural relationship? What advice do you have?
That's so tough. It's so tough because it's so it's something that's so ingrained in like parents. So part of me is like, you know, you can convince your parents if they see the person and for who they really are, but at the same time, like, you don't want to be, you know, seeing someone, you know, without your parents' approval or behind your parents' back. A lot of people, they can't do that. They don't want to do that. And, you know, I respect that, but I don't know. What would you say? Like, what kind of advice would you give?
If I'm speaking specifically to Muslims, I think it's so important to understand that religion is very important, and the basis of a religion is not to be racist, is not, because essentially it does come down to racism, stereotyping of other cultures, and at the end of the day, parents want what's best for their children. And I think it's so important to treat your children, if they're at an age where they want to be in a relationship, they're probably old enough to have a conversation with. That's how I see it, and I really hope people can be more open-minded and just be more understanding and actually give the other person a chance.
Yeah.
That would be my advice.
I think what you said about, like, religion being the most important thing. I think it's we kind of forget about it sometimes, but our religion is a part of our culture. And when you find someone who, has the same values as you, and, is their number one thing is their Islamic culture, that makes your relationship go by so smoothly. Because now, if they ever came to a disagreement about, oh, my culture, your culture, okay, what does Islam say about it? And if you both truly care about your Islamic culture, you're going to put that ahead of everything. And, our Islamic culture is so beautiful. Like, there's so many, things that you do, because Islam is like so open and respectful and welcoming, and, even events and how you host people or how you greet people and how you make people feel. Like, we don't need to look at our own cultures, because our cultures are not infallible, like, there's a lot of bad things that our culture also has. We just have to look at our Islamic culture. And I think putting that at the forefront of your relationship is the number one thing that you should do. Don't focus on your cultures. Focus on, we both care about this, and this is going to be the most important thing, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's raising kids, whether it's how I treat his family. So yeah, I think also for kids like me, or young people like wanting to get married, maybe if you've tried talking to them and it hasn't worked, maybe try finding someone that they know who is in a cross-cultural relationship, or knows people that are, or is like pro, cross-cultural, and maybe have them talk about it. Maybe the things that your parents are scared of are very like easy things, like very like, oh, like they're just maybe don't know, they're just like ignorant about something, and then, when they see someone that's like, oh, that's not how it is, or that's not true, they might be more receptive, So yeah, I think every case is different, of course, and it's very hard, but, I don't know. Yeah, focusing on your Islamic culture for me is the number one thing.
I love that. Yeah. I like how you put it, that Islam can be at the center of a lot of our commonalities, and to use that as a basis for overcoming any cross-cultural challenges or differences. And I really hope that everyone who is trying to be with someone who's from a different ethnicity or race or culture is able to do so. And yeah. I pray that everyone is able to find their partner. It's hard already to find a partner in the world we live in. So and, I really hope parents don't stand in the way of their children. I know they mean best, but sometimes, unfortunately, they can create a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking to me about your experience in a cross-cultural relationship.
It's been so fun.
It has, and I hope this benefited someone.
Inshallah, everyone who wants to find someone does, and everyone who's in a relationship, inshallah, they are happy and successful, and Allah blesses them, and inshallah, if they are in a cross-cultural relationship, we are too.
Yes.